Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's Elizabeth Elenor with Pause, and actually this is the first pause with our new name, Awakening Wild Women Choosing Conscious Relationships. And I'm super excited to start honing in on relationships of all sorts in this group. And so in Australia here, it's Father's Day coming up. And I would love for you to say hi. I've just seen a couple of people jump on. I'd love for you to say hi in the chat and where you're watching from. And it's time for us to reflect on men, right? Or let's back up and look at fathers in general, because Father's Day is coming up. And let's have a moment. You know, it's really interesting because we have these, Mother's Day and Father's Day and Valentine's Day and freaking Christmas and Easter and all these things that come up, but actually they've ended up being just a commercial way of spending more money, right? A way of promoting, getting people to spend their money. And we've lost the essence of what it is that we are really wanting to celebrate, or the ritual of things, right? And when I was younger, I hated ritual. Because I went into this, I was a little bit of a hippie, and I went into this, it's all propaganda and blah, 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 blah. But as I matured and got a little bit older, I recognized the importance of cycles. And if we didn't have, some sort of celebration or point of focus, that our life would just be day in, day out, and that that lowers the vibration, and it actually becomes quite stagnant in the energy. And so that's when I started looking at the ritual and the celebration in history of these things, right? Now, Father's Day is not something that was celebrated way back. Men were honored for men, right? Way back. And women were honored for women way back, like way back. And then there was a distortion that happened. And so I want to look at that. I want to look at reflecting and pausing on men, because regardless of whether it's a thing to spend more money or not, I would love for us to look at, in this place where we're consciously, we're choosing conscious relationships. What is your relationship with your father? Is he still alive? What is, has he passed? For me, my dad died when I was 15, right? And it was a huge shift in my reality, because I grew up in a family where before I was born, my dad was healthy. And then around about when I think I was about 4 or 5 or something, I don't really remember. I don't know. He started getting sick, and he ended up on a kidney machine. So he had a dialysis kidney failure. And I only remember my dad sick. And so as a little girl, my mum went out and, worked for the family. And my dad was a house mum, right? Looked after me, because by the time, that all happened, my brothers were getting a little bit older and blah, blah, blah. I just got a phone call, sorry. My dad was my whole world. And so when he died when I was 15, everything fell apart for me, and I didn't actually know my mum very well. So I had a really deep belief about who Dad was. And as I, grew up and started becoming an adult and, understanding things, I recognized that actually Dad was not the best husband or, the strong man that my mum really was wanting to experience as a woman who'd had, emotional trauma as a child, right? And was looking for some safety. And then this happened. So in reflection, through understanding my dad more as an adult and not blaming him at all for who he was or anything, instead of blaming mum, because I did a lot of blaming of my mum, that she was this and she was that and she was never at home and blah, 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 all of these things that I, out of my own trauma started saying about my mum. As I got older, I recognized that she was doing the best she could in the circumstances that she had. So knowing my dad and understanding what men are, or what I had started to recognize what was going on in society, I recognized that my mum was doing the best she could, and I healed my relationship with my mum through that process. And so, it's, I've got to tell you, notifications are coming thick and fast today. I don't know what's going on. So it was really, really interesting looking at what society has done to our men. And a lot of men these days are being brought up and raised from little boys in single parent families. And our fathers have disconnected from what their role is, their responsibility, their warrior energy. Men are, the masculine energy that comes through in the warrior energy of a man. All of that sort of thing, that's innate in within the male psyche. All of that has sort of been twisted and convoluted because of a whole heap of historical stuff that's happened, right? Now, I can't see if anyone's making any comments. Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. But I'd love for you to think about what your relationship was or is with your father. And if you've got the willingness and the vulnerability to put it in the comments, I would love for you to share it with us as a community, because what you share then supports other women to be able to reflect and feel safe and comfortable. Something that you may start recognizing, and especially coaches, any coaches that are on here, it gives the opportunity for other people, other women in our community to reflect on themselves, right? And it's a beautiful way to serve. So if you have something that you'd like to share, I'd love for you to put in the comments. So, we've got two different things there, right? We've got the father figure that we were brought up with. And if we have children, we've got the father of our children that we're looking at as well. And so my question to you, or opportunity to reflect, as someone that is choosing a conscious relationship or conscious relationships, what's your relationship with your father? What pains and traumas may still be there, bonds that may still be there? What are some of the love and connection and deep levels of appreciation that you have for your father, right? Because these are all the things that Father's Day can come and go really quickly, and we give our presents and, off we go again, because that's what we've been conditioned to do. But as someone that's choosing a conscious relationship, I'm asking you to reflect on this, right? To recognize where you sit with your conscious relationship. This is an opportunity in this moment in Father's Day to have a look how you processed your relationship, and if any healing needs to be done, right? What was your relationship like with your father as a child? And can you look at how that has supported you to be who you are now? And what do you need to look at? Is there any healing that needs to be done around that? How are your relationship with other men when it comes to, because whatever happened with you and your father can be reciprocal, energy, and that if there's any, both, if there's any trauma or dysfunction, and if there's any appreciation and love and beautiful connection, energy, both of those affect the way you bring in and attract men in your life, right? And so this is an opportunity for you to reflect and maybe to look at any healing that may be needed, or an opportunity to really appreciate your father if he's still around, and to put that energy into this Father's Day. Now, I don't know if Father's Day is something in all countries at exactly the same time. I have a feeling it's not, but here in Australia, Father's Day is coming up next week. It's in September. I think it's the first Sunday in September. And so, a lot of women have a very disconnected relationship with their father, especially if you're around my age, in my generation, where the conditioning of that time in society was the father went out to work, the mother was generally at home looking after the children in some shape or form, and the father had a lot of weight on him. This is, post wartime, and so there may have been some trauma and psyche, emotional detachment from men. Men weren't allowed to show their feelings, and men don't cry and all that crap that was around at the time. And so there was a lot of very, very disconnected energy between their children and their father. The father worked, and wait until your father gets home, and he was the one that reprimanded. That didn't happen in my family, but I know that was the case in the generation that I grew up in. Now, if you're a little bit younger than me, it may have been a little bit different as well. And these days, I know the father of my kids grew up in a single parent family, right? He was the only boy at the time. His two sisters and his mother were very, very feminist, and actually were, quite critical of him. Not the mother so much, but the two sisters were very critical of him, and he was the male scapegoat, right? So I have noticed men of that generation, their warrior energy goes into their gaming, right? Xboxes and, killing and punching and getting into the warrior energy on games, and totally disassociating from society and from their role in the family. And so, a lot of society these days are very twisted and convoluted, and the energy, the dysfunction is, emotional detachment, a lot of narcissistic behavior, gaslighting women, all of these things is something that generally a lot of women have been brought up with. Now, not always, but that is something that definitely has been something that I've heard a lot of through my time as a healer and mentor and coach. So I am seeing a little bit of the comments. So, hey, Evelyn, I feel I had a very cruel father. My father passed when I was 12. Yeah. And so, look at the reflecting on that of, have you done the healing around that? And the, I know a little bit, Evelyn, of some of the stuff that you've been through with other men, and how that can actually play out in our relationships if we don't do the work on ourselves to change that. I know before I met Tim, when I went through the process of looking at what it is that I wanted to create in my relationship, and I'd been through quite a few, I'd had two full relationships, and both of them were narcissistic. Both of them were emotionally unavailable. And being a healer and doing a lot of conscious work and awareness on myself, I knew that I'd much rather be by myself than experience the same again. And so I did a lot of deep diving into my own emotional energy, looked at the threads of where I'd been, what my relationship was like with my father. And one of the things that I picked up and understood was that my dad was sick, and I grew up looking after him. He was on a kidney machine. One of my jobs was to put all of the tubes in and the artificial kidney and put the saline through the tubes, and I had to get all the air bubbles out and all of that sort of thing. It was very, a lot of responsibility for a 12-year-old. And I used to have to shop as well. And so I was constantly in that place, funny being a healer, I was constantly in that place of trying to heal my dad. And that's what I attracted in my relationships. I attracted men that needed healing. Funny that, isn't it? And so I did a lot of work on myself to clear that and to stand strong and to start saying, no, I don't. In fact, the man that I actually married, I stayed with him, even though he was narcissistic, or had narcissistic behaviors. I stayed with him until I'm like, man, I got to work this out, because I am not creating another relationship like this. And I stayed and I stayed and I stayed until I worked it out. And that's when I went, I'm in this pattern where I'm trying to heal my men, the men in my life. And when I deeply understood that I no longer had to heal them, the next day I said, it's over, I'm going. Well, actually, I told him he had to go because it was, he had moved into my house. So, and so I never, again, I was by myself for a long time. And then when I met Tim, so before that, I picked up when I was attracting men or men that needed healing. And oh my gosh, don't they all, right? Because women have this tendency to be very nurturing, and there's a difference between dysfunctional healing and just being a loving, nurturing woman. There's a bit of a frequency change with that. And so when I met Tim, I had already been in that space of saying no to that energy, right? And so I no longer attracted it. However, I had this one little bit left, and we had been together for quite a while, maybe, I think we'd been together for about 6 months, when I heard myself say, and I think I've shared it on here before, I heard myself say, don't eat that, I don't want you to die on me. And it was the second time I said it that I just, and it's like whole body experience where I could hardly breathe, and I had to turn around so he didn't see what was going on. And I recognized that there was a deep part of me that really wasn't opening my heart to him, because I didn't want him to die on me like my dad did, because the last person to love me as deeply as Tim did was my dad. And so it was really like this moment, and it was like it was like my heart had just slightly opened, and it was just there, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to look at that monster. And so being a healer, being someone, when you're working with women in this capacity, it's really important to do your own work, right? To do your own program, to do your own, processes or whatever. It's really important to be deep diving so that you can hold the space for other women. And so I did the deep dive. I went in, did my processes and cleared that energy and moved it into neutrality, right? And so therefore, the memory is still there, but the trauma and the charge is no longer in my body. And I, you know, in a you know, cheeky way, turned to Tim when I got it. I said, hey, by the way, just letting you know that you can die if you want to. I'm all good with it, right? And he just laughed because I told him what was happening. And I didn't mean it, of course. We were just joking. So I'm just asking you to really reflect on your relationship with men and the fathers in your life, right? The father energy, because with Father's Day coming up, we can let it slide. We can go and buy the gift and give it and hand it over, right? However, we're choosing conscious relationships. And so this is an opportunity to reflect, to deep dive, to recognize, to honor, to respect all of the good things, and also do the healing around all of the things that may still be triggers, traumas, you know, patterns, conditioning patterns, and really to look at that within ourselves, because we are the ones that when we clear that out of our own vibrational space, that's when we expand, that's when we become, you know, the wild, beautiful goddess women that we were born to be, and we can hold strong, because women hold a massive space on the planet. We have creative energy physically in our body. We can create. We've got a womb there ready to create life. And it's an opportunity for us to become more and more of who we are, to become deeper and stronger and more powerful and more expansive. And the more we can be in that space, the more good comes onto the planet, the more our vibration holds space for thousands of others to do their own healing, to reflect. And this is the vibration that starts making our world the place that we want our children to grow up in, and stop looking at what's going wrong with the planet, but start doing our own internal work. So if you are someone that goes, how on earth do I even do that? How do I do that reflecting, refining? How do I change those traumas and shift them? And need some support with that, just let me know. Put yes please in the comments here, and I can send you a link and we can have a chat about it. It's easy, quick. The type of work that I do is called recoding, and it's really easy way of supporting yourself to be that warrior woman that you know that you are, and hold that space for yourself, your children, other children, and the men in our lives, right? It's us. We are the nurturers. And so a lot to reflect on today. And if you're in this group, I know that you've got the opportunity and the capacity to do this. Much love. Take care and enjoy the rest of your week.